Welcome everybody to another edition of Rubbin is Racing. I'm your host, Mr. CJ Sports. In the studio with me, as always, my co-host Steve Big Sweat Billmeyer. How you doing tonight, Steve?
I'm doing good, and I'm glad to be here. I've had to deal with so much bullshit already today. I just want to talk racing now.
Oh, goodness. Before we jump into this, make sure you guys check us out on Facebook. You can check us out 110 Nation Sports. Also check us out on Twitter at 110 Nation. Make sure you guys check out Steve's Facebook group, NASCAR and Other Racing. Later on, he'll talk a little bit more about that. But make sure you guys check that out and get part of the group discussion and what everything's going on in the racing world. Not just NASCAR, but the whole racing world. I got an opportunity. Tickets fell into my lap Saturday night. Kind of unexpected, really good seats, fourth turn, front row. Well, actually, we had row two, but people were sitting on our seat instead of making them move. I did the gentleman thing and said, you know what? You guys can go ahead and sit there. We'll go ahead down and sit in the front row. So, had an opportunity. We had all work. It was kind of last moment, so we didn't get there until a little bit before halfway. It was about lap 180 when we showed up. But looking forward to getting your view and what you got to see from the TV aspect. And I'm definitely going to give my opinions and my thoughts what I saw from the fourth turn view.
Yeah, it's got there about 180 into it. Hell, you missed all the crowd and everything. You didn't have to deal with that.
No. No, it was pretty smooth sailing.
It's always a good show. When I worked at Hendrick Motorsports, I don't know if you noticed or not, but there's a mobile home park right across the street from the racetrack.
Mm-hmm.
I used to live there. And on weekends like this, hell, I would have 5,000 neighbors, and all of them wanting to use my bathroom. So that I don't miss, but I do miss the convenience of seeing the race. And contrary to popular belief, it was a pretty interesting race yesterday, even though Martin Truex laid the smackdown on everybody. I mean, it was time-wise the fastest race of that distance that's ever been run. He led the most laps of any race that's been run before, mileage-wise. I mean, he set all kinds of records. The interesting thing to me was everybody talked about what a great job Cole Pearn and the crew did and everything. And last year, they were hanging Cole Pearn from the highest tree. They thought he was the biggest disaster that had hit Martin Truex, the worst crew chief to have and everything. Kind of amazing how public opinion flips 180 degrees from one to the other in the span of a year.
Oh, yeah. And I got to thank Martin Truex for that, because it made me look like I didn't know what I was talking about, because I told them that we'd probably be getting out of there around 11, 12 maybe, that every year it's been about 11, 12 o'clock that I've gotten out of there when I've gone to the 600, and even told my ex, expect us to be back about 2 o'clock. I had dropped my son off because I had to be at work at 5 o'clock this morning, and I looked at my clock watch, and it was, I think, just turning or maybe a couple minutes before 10 o'clock when that race ended, and I just dropped, my jaw hit the ground, like, are you kidding me? Like, this race was not supposed to be over by 10 o'clock.
No, it went by pretty quick, but it was definitely a dominating performance by the whole 78 team.
Oh, yeah.
From the owner on down, they all came loaded for bear when they showed up, and they proved that it's not just Joe Gibbs racing, it's pretty much Toyota that's just dominating the season, even though they're a satellite team of Joe Gibbs. It's, they're the definition of a satellite team. They're 1,000 miles away or so in Colorado, so it's not like they can just run around the corner and get, talk to somebody over there. It takes some planning. But that team's really come into its own. And I keep hearing rumors of a 2-car operation next year, and I don't know if that's what Furniture Row Racing needs or not. Yeah, they're doing real good the way they are now.
Oh, yeah.
You know, old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Now, and this might be a little far fetched, but with the '78 team turning around, should Kurt Busch get any of this credits? Because it seems like this whole program turned around that year that they brought Kurt Busch in, and then Kurt Busch went on his way, and you know, obviously they landed Martin Truex with the whole, you know, issue with Michael Waltrip Racing. Should Kurt Busch get any credit in this organization's turnaround, or is, you know, he just another seat, another butt to fill the seat for a year?
Yeah, I think the credit really needs to go to both J.D. Gibbs and Joe Gibbs for turning that program around. They're the ones that have really stuck through it and never gave up and always stayed positive and knew sooner or later things were going to work out. It reminds me a lot of Hendrick Motorsports when they went to 2 cars and then to 3 cars, and everybody said it'll never work, you're crazy, yada, yada, yada. And Rick Hendrick just stuck to his plan and filled in the missing pieces, and suddenly they became good, and then they became dominant. So, yeah, I think a lot of the credit should go to J.D. and Joe Gibbs for the way things are going there now, because it really was their plan to get things going like they are, and I think they've done a good job of that.
Now, is it wrong of me, and I know the story behind the scene when it comes to Martin Truex and his girlfriend, and I don't have any problem. No, trust me, I have no problem with Martin Truex winning the race. The only issue I had with the whole race yesterday is I wish it had been a little bit more competitive. I would have liked to see some swapping for the lead at some point. And I think with about 50 laps left, when Jimmy Johnson and Kevin Harvick caught him, and Jimmy Johnson was trying to pass it, I think he did pass him. I don't know if he actually got credit for any laps led. I don't know if he actually led official lap. You know, I started to get excited, and that's when the caution came out. I don't know if they made adjustments, but after that caution came out, Truex took back off, and that was the end of the story. But I have no problem with them winning. Like I said, I just wish that it would have been more competitive. But is it wrong of me, even though I know the back history, and Truex deserves the win more than anybody else, I think, in my book, especially the last year or two that he has had, but him being a pilot of Joe Gibbs Racing, and don't get me wrong, Kyle Busch is my man. You know, it's Kyle Busch and Danica Patrick, so it's not anything anti-Joe Gibbs Racing, but we've had this discussion where we need other drivers to win. I think Joey Logano winning at the All-Star race and Keselowski winning at Talladega. Outside of that, I can't hardly remember anybody else winning a race this year outside of a Joe Gibbs Racing car. Is it wrong for me not to be excited for Truex as maybe as excited as I should? Because to me, even though it's not technically Joe Gibbs Racing, it's still the pilot of Joe Gibbs Racing. So to me, it's kind of like the 5th member of that team. It was another Joe Gibbs Racing win for me in my book. And so I'm not as excited as I probably should be. Am I wrong for this?
No. You want to hear wrong? I'll give you wrong. I was glad Truex won, but not because of what Sherry has gone through.
Oh, yeah.
I think that has turned into a sentimental deal, and I'm glad she's getting healthy now and everything, but it has nothing to do with racing. It has nothing to do with driving the car.
Yeah.
And I'm sure this is going to start some hate mail, and I'm not being hateful. I'm just being honest. That's the way old Stevie is. And, you know, so, yeah, I was glad to see a driver like Truex win, but not for the sentimental reasons and everything that everybody else has. I was more glad for Cole Pearn than I was for Truex, because of the way people dogged him last year. I didn't think he deserved that, and I think he proved yesterday that he didn't deserve that. So that's where my highlight was. I mean, And yeah, it's another Joe Gibbs racing victory, and it does get old. But racing's been like that forever. I mean, back in the 60s, the King won a bunch of races, and a lot of people didn't like the King because he won all the time.
Mm-hmm.
In the 80s, it was Earnhardt. Earnhardt won all the time, and people started disliking him. In the 90s, it was Jeff Gordon. You know, people are like that. They get tired of seeing the same person win over and over and over again. It kind of makes the race get anticlimactic after a certain point. You go, well, he's going to win. I'll go do something else. But
you definitely could have said that yesterday.
Nature of the beast more than anything else.
Definitely could have said that yesterday. Like, he's going to win. I can go do something else. I don't know. With me, with Truex, I think that part of it, I feel for him because I know that it's not necessarily race related, but I can only imagine being there for his girlfriend and being in the appointments and the side distractions and the concern and everything else and the sickness that went along with that. How much of that he had to actually overcome and you know, be able to concentrate and be mentally prepared and even physically, because I'm sure that had to wear him down as well. But not only that, with that, you know, and I understand that's more of a sentimental thing. Also, the way that it went down with Michael Waltrip Racing and how he was kind of cut out of the equation. You know, that those things that all just piled up for Martin Truex is kind of why, if anybody deserve a win, I'm not gonna say deserve a win, but you know, if I'm going to watch somebody lead 392 out of 400 laps, I don't have maybe as much of a problem watching him do it with everything that he has overcome, especially this last handful of years, to accomplish what he just accomplished yesterday. You know, if it would have been Kyle Busch, even though I'm a Kyle Busch fan, yeah, probably not so lenient on, okay, he led 392 laps, because it's Kyle Busch. If it had been Dale Jr., yes, I wouldn't have been thrilled to watch that race. But to know his background and know that everything, to include what happened at Michael Waltrip Racing and how he just kind of got X'd out of that with the sponsorship deal, you know, Napa pulling out because of everything went on. And then, of course, you know, his girlfriend and everything else. Okay, I can look past the fact that you just crushed the race that I rushed to get to, and the race finishes by 10 o'clock and you lead 392 laps. Knowing your background, I think I'll give you the free pass, but note to the rest of the 39 drivers out there, don't let this happen again, because there's not too many free passes I'm going to give where I'm going to let somebody dominate a race, especially a race I make an effort to go to, and it'd be fine with me in my book.
Yeah, you know, everybody was all great going and glad you did it, Martin, and all that, but can you imagine what the fan reaction would have been if Kyle Busch had led 392 or 400 laps? God, they would still be crying about that now. Fans would have hated that big time. And I'm sure that sometime this week, somebody at Furniture Row is going to get a call from NASCAR saying, look, we're glad your driver won, yada, 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 yada. Don't do that anymore. Don't stink up our show. You know, and NASCAR is sensitive about that. They don't want you leading all the laps and nothing happening. That doesn't draw fan interest. That kind of pushes it away. So, you know, I'm sure somewhere down the line, through the Pocono weekend, somebody's going to get a message over to Furniture Row and tell them, you know, be a little more considerate of everything that's going on, or pre-qualifying, pre-race inspection might get a little more difficult.
I do want to take this moment real quick to make two notes, or speak on two notes. One, I want to make sure that I thank the United States military. One, for all those that have lost, and all those that have lost family members. With Steve having his son in the military and me being prior service, we know the risk. We know the hearts. You know, the the losses, and we know about all this way too close. So I want to send our thoughts and prayers out to all those that are serving, that have served, and those that have lost. But I also got to make sure that I thank the military, because that's where the tickets came from. We had a buddy through a buddy that was out there and was part of the ceremonies. He had 4 tickets. He didn't know anybody, and that's how we ended up with the tickets. So, I want to thank the military for even giving us the opportunity to be there. But I can say, even though with it being the show that it was yesterday, and even though Truex led all but 8 laps, NASCAR at least gained two new fans yesterday, because both my roommate I've watched the race with. As a matter of fact, we watched Talladega together. He's somewhat already a NASCAR fan. The other one had never watched the race, and by the time they both left, they are all in. They definitely liked what they watched yesterday, even though there wasn't as much action as we was hoping to see.
Well, definitely, once you get them there, they're hooked. Once they get exposed to a race on that level live, it's hard to say you're not a race fan after that. While we're on the subject, CJ, I do want to thank you for your service as well.
Yes, sir.
And it is appreciated. That's something that I've noticed. I used to not care anything about the military. It didn't mean nothing to me. Memorial Day didn't mean anything. Veterans Day didn't mean anything until my son enlisted. And then all of a sudden it got to be a big deal. And then when I found out that he was being sent to Okinawa, Japan, and Okinawa, Japan is the first line of defense for the U.S. military against North Korea. They're the closest station to North Korea. Anything happens in North Korea, Okinawa is right on top of it, and those guys are the ones that are going to go in and clear a path.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it worries me when I hear of Kim Dickhead or whatever his name is, Dong something, stirring things up. It bothers me because I know that it'll involve my son, but at the same time, I'm very damn proud of my son for what he does in the military. And so now, all of a sudden, Memorial Day means big things to me. Veterans Day means big things to me. And I just kind of converted over from being somebody that didn't care to somebody that really cares about our country and our country's defense. And you just can't say enough about people that'll dedicate even a small part of their lives to serving in the military. It's just an impressive thing for me, and I'm glad. It was really glad to see NASCAR and Charlotte Motor Speedway showing respect and honor to the military by putting fallen comrades' names on the windshields of the cars and things like that. I mean, nothing is going to draw this country back together more than standing behind a common cause, and that common cause right now is the military. So that's where it's at for me. I'm kind of like when motorcycle gangs first started after World War II. These guys come back that have been to Afghanistan and to Iraq and to places like that and seen combat. What do they do for excitement now? How do they, what motivates them, to even get out of bed during the day? So, things like special recognition from races and sporting events and things like that, I think are a good thing for the country. So all in all, it was a real good day yesterday and a real good weekend. Besides the fact that Martin Truex kind of stunk up the show for NASCAR by leading the whole thing.
You have no idea how excited I was when we got. I think the caution was around lap 50, between 50 and 60. I can't remember exactly when it was. It might have been around 58. I can't remember. But how excited I was when I watched Jimmy Johnson close that gap on Truex, when I watched Kevin Harvick join that duo, when we had a threesome. It looks like, we were going to have green flag stops. We were going to see what crew got their man in and out, who got down pit road the best, got their speeds down, which was real interesting to watch from our point of view, as we were right there in turn 4. So, of course, we was there when they were getting their speeds down and watching these cars lock up their tires and some of them, almost lose it. Like it was interesting to watch some of these guys try to get down pit road, and I really thought we were going to see a 50 or so lap race. And like I said, that caution came out, and I think it was just a debris caution, and that just kind of, I don't know if there was adjustments made or what the deal was, but when they came back out and took that green flag, Truex took back off, and there was no re-catching him. And how difficult, because obviously we don't see this very often. I mean, I think the track record they beat was from, if I believe I heard that right, it was 160 point something miles an hour, and it had been a record since like 1995. And then, of course, the 392 laps led is something that's never been done as well. So, obviously, it's not something that happens often. But how difficult is it to get your car set up that well? And what does it take for a team to be that dominant? When you crew chief, or even as a car owner, did you ever have a car that was anything close to being that dominant in any particular weekend?
I sat here pretty much through the whole race yesterday, trying to figure out why they were so strong, why the 78 car was so superior to the other cars in the field. I mean, it just wasn't, I just couldn't figure it out. Even when they had problems, early on, they were having problems getting the left front tire off of the car on a pit stop because it wasn't hung up in the fender well. What it was is they had so much rebound built into that left front shock that it was, even with the tire off the ground, the rebound in the shock was still holding the tire up in the fender well. Shock rebound is basically the length of time it takes the compressed shock to stretch back out to its normal height. You can change the shims in the shock body, and you can change the speed at which that shaft extends. You can slow it down to hold the weight longer on that corner of the car. You can speed it up to release that weight longer or quicker to the other tires. And there's two strokes to the shock. There's a compression stroke where it compresses, and then there's the rebound stroke where it lengthens. It doesn't change the amount of weight that transfers from one wheel to the other during cornering. It just changes the amount of time it takes. The best example I can think of off the top of my head, if your car is tight going into the corner, you can put more rebound in the left rear shock, and that'll hold that weight that's transferred back there under acceleration. It'll slow that transfer down to the right front, so it takes longer for the right front to load, which keeps the right front unloaded, but it keeps the load from making the car tight in the corner. It slows that reaction down. In my day, shocks weren't that big a deal, and nowadays shocks are pretty much everything as far as handling goes. People have really learned how to use them, and I think that was part of what Truex had. The way he had that left front tire had so much rebound in it that it kept that left front tire planted to the track and gave the car something to pivot off of when going through the corner. the way these cars are set up now with the big sway bar and soft spring package, it used to be that the front tires drug the rear end through the corner. They determined the corner speed and how you went through the corner and everything, and now the car is all driven off the right rear tire. The right rear tire pushing the car through the corner and dictating the moves through the corner. So the people that are on top of that, and evidently the 7018 is, or at least they hit on it yesterday, they had a really good car. They had that car where it would pivot on that left front tire in the middle of the corner and keep that car freed up so he could get a straight line off of the corner and down the straightaways with it. And that really helped his corner exit speed and his speed down the straightaway. But it just seemed like, I couldn't see or figure out anything else that made that car so superior to the others, And don't take this the wrong way. It's not like Martin Truex or Kyle Busch, who is that much of a superior driver, but he sure showed it yesterday. And I've never really been involved with a race car like that was just dominant from the beginning to the end. I've had some runs with Tim Richmond where about halfway through the race, Timmy would turn it on and Harry would make the correct setup change on a pit stop, and suddenly we were flying, and it was see you later, alligator. I've been through experiences like that with Jeff Bodine, and it does happen, but I've never been that good from the opening green flag to the checkered flag to just be that consistently strong through the whole race.
What, and you'll be able to tell me maybe more, because you obviously get to hear more on the TV. One, what changed? It just seemed like the race was a little bit more competitive All-Star Weekend, and I understand that there was segment breaks and everything else, but it seemed like overall it was more competitively close. So what possibly changed, or just the Truex cars, they just had the perfect setup? And then also, I was expecting cars to fall off, especially someone up front. As the night fell, and as the weather had changed and it cooled down, it just seems that track usually goes through a transition, and usually somebody from the front falls off, is no longer any good, and someone from the back, has got the right setup for the night part of it and makes his way to the front. But it seems that those three cars, it didn't phase them any. It seemed that Truex, Jimmy Johnson, and Harvick from the beginning to the end were the three cars that you figured was going to win the race, and it just seemed like nobody else ever clicked at any point, and nothing changed. Was there not a big change this year? Was it because of the package, the tires? What was different that it just didn't seem like it going from a under the sun to under the light race? We didn't get that change that we normally get.
Yeah, you're right. We usually, there's usually a good transition. That track changes quite a bit, just from the track temperature changing. You can get late in the afternoon and have sunshine on turns 3 and 4 and turns 1 and 2 because of the condos built over the grandstands. That end will be in shade, and the car will handle it totally different in 1 and 2 than it does in 3 and 4. The track usually picks up speed, usually gets a little bit more grip as the track rubbers in, and the track cools off. That usually provides more grip. But I'm like you, I didn't see that happening yesterday. And I think it might be more toward the tire that Goodyear brought to the track, because they're still working on their tires for tracks too. They're testing pretty much every chance they get to try to get tires to match up to this low downforce package and match up to what the drivers want. And quite possibly Goodyear brought a tire again that might have been too hard, not allow the track to rubber up as much because it wasn't losing. The tires weren't losing that much rubber during a run. It might have been that it was, the tire stayed consistent because the hardness stayed consistent throughout the race. I don't want to point the finger of blame at Goodyear, but I do understand Goodyear is having to work really hard to develop the tire to work with this low downforce package. One of the things that I noticed they've done away with is they're not using that dual tread face tire they developed last year as much this year. The one that has the half of the tire, the third of the tire that's a hard compound rubber to alleviate the tire wear from running so much camber in the front and rear geometry now. It just, I still think that's a good idea, but evidently it's not working too good with the low downforce package because I haven't seen that tire used but one time that I can think of off the top of my head this year for racing. So I think later on in the year, by the time the chase rolls around and we're going back to tracks we've been to before, Goodyear will have a pretty good handle on what kind of tire they need to maintain the type of racing the drivers want. So I'm going to hold off judgment on that until we get into the chase and see how things do then. See if, they do bring a tire that's not too hard, that does give up, and it does make the driver drive the car more.
Now, I know this is not exactly what you're referencing to when you said that the tire, they weren't losing no tire or they weren't laying down any rubber. I can testify, though, when I was standing at McDonald's after the race and I ran my hands through my hair, I had rubber falling out of my hair. So I know they were losing some rubber at some point. And it was also entertaining when my roommate went ahead and ordered his food because we were sitting so close. We still had our hearing was not all the way 100% still. And he went to order, and he started yelling at the cashier, and I had to stop him. I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I said, you're yelling. I said, you don't need to yell at her. He's like, I'm yelling? I said, yes, you are yelling. I said, bring it down a few notches. And she knew exactly where we came from, so, she didn't take offense to it or anything. But I had to slow him down a little bit because he was rather loud with it. But I don't know, it just... Every night race, it usually goes through a transition, especially the fall off in the temperature. And yesterday was one of those days that it rained all day long, and when we headed out, it was still sprinkling and a light rain in our area. And now, granted, it took us an hour and a half, 2 hours to get there. So, I got about halfway. I reached out to. We have a young driver that comes on the show about once a month, maybe once every other month, Kayla Lyons. I knew they were at the track, so, I messaged her father and found out, what was going on. Was there any delays, what the track looked like, what the weather looked like, and, he told me it's clear. There's no rain in the forecast now at this point till 3 o'clock. The track's dry. Everything's ready to go. And it, it's just one of those things. It was sunny. It was nice. It was warm. And even though it was a hot, warm day, even though it rained, it was still real humid. I wore pants and I had a hoodie because I knew every time that I've been to the race at Charlotte, no matter how hot it's been during the day, it gets cool enough on Memorial Day weekend that either I wish I would have brought a jacket or something light to put on over my T-shirt, or I bring something to make sure that I do. And I made sure my son had pants and a jacket with him as well. He brought it, but I was going to make sure as well. And I even told them, the guys I went with, look, you might want to make sure you bring a jacket because it gets cool all of a sudden. I said, plus the wind coming off those cars doesn't help that situation any. And so, it was one of those things that just like every other time, everything was lining up the same as, the conditions, the weather, everything. And I was just really expecting at some point to see, somebody have a difficult time getting the handle on the car, and I was waiting for someone to all of a sudden, and I'm watching the whole race, and I'm watching Truex dominate this race, and I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, it's all right. It's all right. I don't have a problem with Truex winning, but somebody's car is finally going to come in. The track is going to change. The temperature's getting colder. That means the track's getting cooler. The clouds have moved. At some point, there was no clouds at all. And then there was a little bit of clouds, and there was a lot more clouds. It was just a lot of different conditions. I'm like, somebody's car is going to come in and is going to disrupt things, and things are going to get interesting. And it just like it never happened, and I just kind of left there, scratching my head because any other night race that I've gone to, that is what happened, especially at Charlotte.
Yeah, that's the thing. It was a head-scratching day yesterday. A lot of things that normally happen didn't happen, and it pretty much changed the whole complexion of the race. And it's like the weather factor. Charlotte is, a track that the weather really affects the track and the handling of the cars, and it just never seemed to change yesterday. Never really went from one extreme to the other. Never really went from being a tight racetrack to a loose racetrack. It just kind of stayed on an even keel for the whole 600 miles, which is, again, it's very unusual for Charlotte to be that way, but
yeah,
it was, and it's going to have crew chiefs in October when they come back to Charlotte for the chase race. Crew chiefs will be looking at their notes and scratching their head and going, really? Is this what happened? And I got a feeling notes that they took yesterday aren't going to help them too much in October.
No.
I just don't see it. I think that's great. I think it'll make for an interesting race.
And while I'm applauding or shouting out to organizations or people or whatever, I don't know what it used to be like at Charlotte getting out of the race. But let me tell you what. There was not one moment that I was in sit-still traffic at all yesterday. And it was a good crowd. I was actually surprised. It was probably one of the bigger crowds that I've seen at the 600, and I've gone to probably 4 or 5 600s. And with the weather being the way it was, I was really surprised on top of that because I thought that would just, shoo away a few people because I don't want to go sit there and rain out, this, that, and the other. So I was really surprised, one, because of the weather, but two, there was quite a bit of attendance. It was, like I said, a lot better of attendance than I've seen in the last few years that I've been there. And the last 2 times that I've been to the 600 or been to the Charlotte race, I can't remember I think last time I went was the All-Star race and then the 600 before, then the rest of them have all been 600s. I've only been to one All-Star race. But the last couple times I've been to it, it has been really easy getting out, and especially in front of the track where it's like 4 lanes, and as you get past turn 4, they cone it off so you're down to 1 lane, and that's it. And to know that there are that many people, and you go from 4 lanes down to 1 lane, and then you got 1 lane that comes out, and that's where I parked at, right outside turn 4, and then they got 1 lane that's coned off to help you merge into. So there's technically 2 lanes, but those 4 lanes only get the option of 1 lane. And to know that there was no traffic, like I was at McDonald's within 10-15 minutes of the race, and it wasn't like the McDonald's was right there. It was a legitimate 10 to 15 minute drive if there would not have been a race that weekend. I tell you what, the way they got that organized, the way they got that mapped out, the way that those troopers take care of getting those people in and out, I definitely got to tip my hat because, like I said, the last couple times there has not been a wait. I have been blown away. I've been to quite a few other tracks, and I still remember the Kentucky race that people didn't even make it into that race that first year that they brought NASCAR to Kentucky. And I've dealt with that traffic. I've dealt traffic, in Martinsville. I've dealt traffic at Bristol. I've dealt with quite a bit of traffic at different races. Even Rockingham, when they brought the trucks back a few years ago, and I got to go to the first one when Casey Kane won, I'd say that was a nightmare getting in and out of. And there ain't really much out by Rockingham. It's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. But that the traffic flow and how they get people out, especially, I tell you what, it's probably second to none experience, especially these last couple years.
Well, the reason it's that way is because of Humpy Wheeler. Humpy, when he was at Charlotte Motor Speedway, he would pay extra overtime to the troopers that came in and worked the race and worked the traffic. He would give them free seats. They had their own grandstand on the backstretch.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing but the highway patrolmen working the race. They got to sit back there and watch the race for free. Humpy would take care of them. And it got to the point where the highway patrolmen wanted to work security and traffic flow there at Charlotte because they were taken care of very well. And it's all because of Humpy Wheeler's doings that it's like that. You mentioned, you come out of the racetrack to the 4-lane and they pretty much make you go right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I lived across the street and they weren't going to let me drive across that 4-lane to get home. And Harry Hyde clued me in. When I leave the racetrack at Charlotte, I had a box of hats in the car with me. And every time I rolled up to a highway patrolman directing traffic, I rolled down the window, hand him a couple of hats, tell him I needed to get across the track, and they would let me go across then. It's kind of a you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back deal. So they do a fantastic job of moving that many people
Yes.
in and out of that racetrack in that length of time. And like I said, it's, simply because of what Humpy Wheeler started and Charlotte has continued to carry on that gets it done that way. And things like that, you've noticed it, you commented on it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of fans remember things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And next year when they're trying to decide which races they want to go to, they'll be like, well, let's go to Charlotte. Traffic's not that bad. We can get in and out of there real quick. And a lot of times that's a deciding factor.
And I was sitting there thinking about it. I've been to 8, I say it like it's a lot, but, there's a lot of fans out there that ain't been to 8 different tracks. But I've been to 8 different NASCAR sanctioned tracks. And I say that because, Rockingham, it was just a truck race, but, it's still a sanctioned event. And I've been to a lot of local tracks, and I don't consider them, as big of a deal. But Charlotte, by far, especially the last 2 times I've been to that track, is hands down the best when it comes to getting out of that track. I was really blown away last night. Like, I was expecting at some point for the traffic to stop. Like, and I even made the comment, I believe up here somewhere is where it's going to slow down and it's going to get bottlenecked and everything else. And it just never happened. I never slowed down. I never came to a stop. I think the only part that I actually slow down is when you come, I want to say about 3 to 5 minutes up the road is when you come to that little city where it's like the last really little city. It's once you pass the Philip Morris and then you pass the Walmart and the Jack and where the Jack in the Box and all that stuff is, and you got the lights, and that's the only reason we slow down is because you had the traffic lights right there. Outside of that, there was no slowing down, there was no stopping. Like it was so smooth, and it just really. It really amazed me because it is a lot of people. And like I said, the attendance, it was a good attendance. It wasn't one of those races that there just wasn't a lot of people and everything else. It was, when I go to the tracks, I look at that kind of thing, especially being here on the radio and, being part of the media. It's one of the things that I take more time to notice. There's a lot more things that I noticed than I didn't just being a fan, growing up or even before I started doing this. And so, that was one of the things I noticed was it was a nice attendance. And to know how smooth it went, and there was I just blown away. But this is another question I want to ask you. And this is really left field, but I'm curious. What your thought is. We watched Kurt Busch do the duel, the 500 and the 600. And I know he's not the only one, and I know that I just can't think of the other ones off the top of my head. And you'd have to refresh my memory. It's not one of those. I don't know. Outside of Danica being in Indy, I don't really keep up with IRL like I should, but I just don't. I know that the IRL series has gotten better and better, and it's become more of a level playing field, and it's gotten more competitive. I just know back in the day it was one or two teams that would just dominate, and it just really got boring to me to watch one or two cars just pretty much lap everybody in the whole race. But Danica's one that came from IRL, and why has that never been brought up as a possibility? Like, I'm sitting there thinking, as many doors as she has opened up and how many walls she has knocked over being a female, I wonder if that's ever been a thought to put her name in the record book for one more thing, to help build her name just one more time, doing the dual duty. Do you think that would ever be a possibility? Obviously, that would be something that happen the next few years as she's getting to be in her mid to later 30s as it is. But do you think that is ever a possibility? That is something that maybe she, part of her legacy, part of her name permanently being in those books is something she would ever consider. And I don't think that, I don't think Stewart-Haas Racing and I'm assuming she would go back and run for Andretti Racing, I believe is who she ran for, would give her a car. Or I'm sure Ganassi would, or not Ganassi, but I'm sure Stewart-Haas would figure something up. But do you think that is ever a possibility? Do you think that she would want to have that in her legacy?
A possibility? Well, hell yeah. I mean, you never heard of her doing any type of yoga or conditioning of anything up until a year or so ago, that she suddenly thinks she needs to be in better shape to drive stock cars. No, I think she's training herself and building her body up to be able to do the double. I think that would be something that would be very high on her list of things to do, especially with the way there's so many non-Danica fans out there. It would be a good way for her to rub their nose in the fact that, not only can I drive these type of cars, I can do it in the same day. Tony Stewart and John Andretti made good moves at it. Kurt Busch made good moves at it. And I think the amount of experience that Danica's got now in both forms of racing, I think, possibly next year or another year later, that she might decide to run both of them, to go ahead and do it now. It's a lot easier with helicopters and everything.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest fallback to it is you miss the driver's meeting at the Cup race, so you automatically start in the back.
Yeah.
But for a car owner like Gene Haas, that's not, something that's going to stop him from letting it happen. It's just, if she can come from the back and finish good, that just makes it so much better and so much more publicity for Gene Haas. And now that he's got the Formula One engineers in his corner and doing the Formula One deal, which is a lot like IndyCar racing, I think she would be the next one to try it, and I really think she could pull it off. I think she could handle it. She's definitely in shape for it. She gets I think a 45-minute rest in the flight from Indianapolis to Charlotte. So, she's got time to catch her breath, rehydrate, and sit down and do it again. So, look for it. I'd pretty much bet on it happening in the next few years before she gets much older.
I don't like comparing males to females, but obviously the chemistry makeup of our bodies are completely different. I wonder how much more difficult it is for a female. I mean, it just physically more demanding on a female body than it is just in a male body, just bone structure, muscle structure, everything else. But also, I wonder how many opinions would that change? Would those that are so anti-Danica would respect be gained by that? Would they look at her differently, regardless how she finished? Just the fact that she accomplished, and especially if she completes even if she completed, especially if she completed, because I think Kurt Busch didn't complete the 600. I think he had a car issue or something, on a wreck or something. If she was able to complete both races on top of that, I wonder how much public opinion would be changed about Danica Patrick if she was able to, if she did that.
It would change some, and some, nothing is ever going to change their opinion.
Oh, yeah.
They are just, there are people that are that chauvinistic that refuse to admit that a female can do things that a man can do. They just, it's no way they're ever going to be convinced that she's a capable race car driver, and simply because she's a woman. That's the only thing they have to base their non-belief in, is the fact that she's a female. I was trying to think. I don't remember exactly what I posted in the NASCAR and Other Racing Facebook group that I have, but it was something about Danica and the way she's climbed the ladder and everything, and this one guy starts in about how she can't do nothing. She's a woman. She needs to give that seat to a man that's a race car driver. The only reason she's got it is because she looks good in a bikini and all this. And one of his comments was, she wrecks all the time. And so I commented back to him a couple of times, and I asked him, I said, what kind of race car do you drive? You seem so knowledgeable about driving a race car. And he's like, oh, I drive dirt late models. But I'm an excellent driver. And so I asked him, I said, have you ever crashed? Since you talk about Danica crashing so much, have you ever crashed? Never heard another word out of him. He wouldn't reply. He wouldn't come back on or anything. I mean, people just, it just amazes me that you can be that closed-minded about something and not be able to look and see the big picture. Yeah, she's a woman. Yeah, she looks good in a bikini, but she looks good in victory lane, too, and she's capable of getting to victory lane. So, why knock her? Why put her down and say she can't drive or she crashes all the time just because she's a female? I don't understand people's way of thinking like that. That, to me, is like thinking from back in the 60s during the admin days and such. I just want to tell these people, you're way behind the times.
Mm-hmm.
You need to get out of the Stone Age and catch up to the present. You mentioned body chemistry and everything, and whether she could handle it being a female,
mm-hmm.
and not only a female, but a tiny female if you've ever stood beside her.
Oh, yes.
But by the same token, do you think a man could handle childbirth?
Probably
do you
not.
think a man could endure all that? It's just in your makeup, in the way you are. And Danica's been racing go-karts since she was, I don't know, knee-high to a tumbleweed. But that's all she's ever done.
Yeah.
And her body is conditioned to it. I don't think it strains her body to race. I think she has no problem overcoming that strain because it's so ingrained in her now since she's been doing it for so long. So, I really wish she would run the double. It would shut a lot of these people up.
It would. It's just 1,100 miles. That's just a lot of miles. But I don't want to step on toes. But Danica, I'm sorry, she looks more than just good in a bikini, first of all. But second of all, for all those fans out there that talk about that, and I say this all the time, the same thing can be said about Dale Jr. I'm sorry, but his on the track performance doesn't justify him being the basically nationwide spokesperson and wrangler and everything else. It was his name and his look. Same with Casey Kane, especially in his early days when they had those commercials, those girls dreaming about him in and wrecking their car. It wasn't because his on track performance that he was getting these endorsement deals. It was because the way he looked. And I'm sorry, but if that's the way you feel, then you need to take that with GoDaddy, Nature's Bread, and everybody else that's sponsoring her, because the millions of dollars that they're throwing her way is not just the way they look, or they would find someone they would go sponsor models and everything else, but instead they feel that there's something behind more than just the way she looks, or they wouldn't be throwing millions of dollars. I can guarantee you that. I bet you that they could probably come up with a million other places that they can spend millions of dollars other than a female that only looks good in a bikini and can't drive a car. So,
yeah, that came up. That was another thing that came up in that post that I was just telling you about. A couple of comments were made. The only reason she had a ride is because she looks good in a bathing suit. And comments to that nature. And one of the female group members wrote back and showed 6 different pictures of Carl Edwards with no shirt on that he posed for in magazines.
Yep.
Nobody says a damn thing about Carl Edwards showing his body off. But good God, let Danica show up in a bikini and the world has come to an end.
Yep.
Or as the Joker says, everybody loses their minds. And why double standard? What difference does it make?
I hate that they use that she's a marketing tool. I'm sorry, but all NASCAR drivers are marketing tools. They are out there to be a billboard. That is all they're out there to be to these companies. So if you label one as a marketing tool, all of them are marketing tools, because that's what they're getting paid for, is to be a big billboard. It's all they're really being paid for.
Exactly. People say, well, she doesn't win races. She doesn't deserve that sponsorship. The sponsor doesn't, winning races is secondary to the sponsor. The sponsor is sponsoring a car to get that company's name out in front of the public any way they can.
Yep.
They, if you win, you get some TV time, but guess what? If you crash, with
TV
all the
too.
replays they show and the after the crash interviews, and later in the highlights they show the crashes and stuff, you get a ton of visibility for your sponsor by being on television like that. And that's the priority for the sponsor. Winning races is secondary. Just get my name out there, get me on TV. GoDaddy last year, I don't know the exact figure, say $10 million. They spent $10 million to sponsor Danica last year. Well, tomorrow morning and every Tuesday morning after a race, each team gets a rundown of how much TV time they actually got down to the second.
Exactly.
How many times their car, their driver, their logo was presented on the television. It's noted, and the teams get a notice of it on Tuesday morning.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the year, GoDaddy might have got, an hour and a half total TV exposure time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they couldn't buy an hour and a half of TV time for $10 million. It costs twice that to get that much advertising time.
Yep.
So it's a winning deal for the sponsor. It's $10 million, but, I'm getting $25 million worth of airtime out of it. And that's what the sponsor wants. It's secondary as to whether you win races or not. M&M's, sure, they like seeing Kyle Busch win, but they know regardless of what happens, Kyle Busch is going to get some TV time.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a win-win for them. I mean,
that was
people don't understand this. They don't look at it from a business standpoint.
As I said,
you have to remember that first and foremost, NASCAR is a business.
Yep.
And a business is something set up and designed to make money. And that's what NASCAR wants to do. People say, well, they don't listen to the fans. Well, yeah, they do, but they listen to their accountants first.
Yeah.
They got to stay in business.
Yep. And that was going to be my point as well. I didn't know that they came out with a report, but, they could care less that one win and that one, 10 minutes after the race TV time. They're more interested in how much TV time that they got versus their money. And I guarantee, they break down, okay, we spent $10 million, but in total for the season, we got 5 hours. So that breaks down to this is how much we paid basically per minute. And you're going to outweigh what's one time in victory lane versus what you possibly get throughout the season. So that was kind of my thought. And to the whole wrecking thing, one, they come out with the stats every year, and I think Danica was actually in the bottom half of the most wrecks per most times be it wrecked or be a part of a wreck or whatever it was. Ricky Stenhouse wrecked the most. Needless to say, it was like every half a wreck, or I forget what the number breakdown was, but Danica was actually more towards the bottom half or in the middle. She wasn't towards the top half. But, honestly, most of the time when she's involved with stuff, it usually is not her fault. Usually she just happens to be at the wrong place at the wrong time or get tied up with someone else. I'm not saying she's innocent. I'm not saying she's never caused a wreck because there's been quite a few that's been her fault. But majority of the time has not even really been her fault, just wrong time at the track. She kind of reminds me of the old Jamie Mack. Jamie Mack used to, especially when he was over Roush Racing, always used to be involved with all these wrecks, but it was never really his fault. He just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time or the wrong part of the pack, and he would just get wrapped up in everybody else's stuff.
Yeah, I worked with Greg Sachs, and Greg Sachs was the same way. He was a wreck magnet. He could be in turns 3 and 4. They would have a wreck in 1 and 2. And somehow or another, he would get swept up in that wreck. I mean, he had, I don't want to say a habit, but he was constantly in the wrong place at the wrong time. And Jamie Mack has been the same way. I mean, it just seems like stuff happens around them more than others.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's karma or luck or whatever, but, it's just the way that it is. It's, really nothing they can do about it. But think about this. This morning at Bass Pro Shops company headquarters, do you think they were happier more about winning the race or happier because their car with their logo was on TV 90% of the time?
Oh, Lord, I would say at least 90% of the time. Then, of course, the sentimental behind the win and the interview that, he got a little bit more TV time than most winners after the race on top of that. But, yeah, I bet you Bass Pro was very, very happy with the amount of TV time they got in yesterday's race.
Yeah, and they wouldn't be any less happier if he'd blown the motor 5 laps from the end and finished 30th.
Yeah.
They would have still been very happy with the exposure they got. And, you've been on the internet today. There's tons of posts on there about that race yesterday. And all of them have a picture of Truex in his Bass Pro Shops driving uniform or in his Bass Pro Shops race car. I mean, their name has been all over the place. So that, that's a case of Martin Truex doing his job.
Yep.
His job is, number 1, get the sponsor happy, and number 2, win races. Well, he did both of them this weekend. More power to him. I'm glad for him.
Yeah. Next week, Pocono? Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah, I believe so. I hadn't really looked, to tell you the truth, but I believe Pocono's next week or this weekend.
I tell you what, it's an interesting track.
It seems like there's Pocono, the trucks, and ARCA this weekend.
It's an interesting track. I don't know. There's certain tracks that I love. There's certain tracks that I could care less. There's certain tracks I just don't like really at all. Pocono is one of those. As interesting as that track is, I don't have a big interest. I don't know why. I'm just not a big Pocono guy. And it's a unique track, and I should have more interest in it. And I just don't know how to explain it. But definitely be sitting down watching it. I got to do my job and I got to watch them. And as a fan, I want to watch it anyway. Just certain tracks, I just don't have. I just don't have the to watch it. Charlotte usually is one of those tracks. It just conveniently close is another one of those tracks that, because it's so spread out, that it is kind of, whatever kind of race to me. And after the All Star race, I was really excited about yesterday's race. I thought we was going to see something different than what we end up seeing. But and
yeah, to me, Pocono, I've got kind of a love-hate relationship with Pocono. The love part is there used to be this little funky motel there called the Tudor Inn. That was the absolute biggest party house I have ever been to in my life. I have seen things there that only a grown man should see. I've seen Buddy Parrott, who was Derek Cope's crew chief when Derek won the Daytona 500. I've seen Buddy, who was a nationally ranked springboard diver when he was in school. I've seen him dive off of the second-story walkway into the swimming pool out in the courtyard and barely make it, but still make it. But it was a tremendous party house atmosphere there. I even had a T-shirt I used to wear at the track that says, "Forget the race, I came to party at the Tudor Inn." But at the same time, it's pretty much a boring race, especially from pit road, because you can't see nothing that's going on anywhere except on that long front stretch, so it's not a lot to hold your attention. They do run fast, and that reminds me, one other thing I always remember about Pocono, one year I had a lump in my crotch that I had to have surgically removed, and so I had it done on like the Monday morning before we were supposed to go to Pocono that weekend. So I had that surgery done, and they shaved me so they could do the surgery. And, well, by the time race day got there, it was about like a 4 or 5 day beard growth. It was itching pretty bad. And back then, when they cut to a commercial, if you were watching on satellite TV, they just kept on filming. The announcers would be talking amongst themselves and everything, but you would see what was going on. But they had a caution flag. I'm waiting on Richmond to come down pit road, and the pit wall at that time was Armco with telephone pole sawed off post holding the Armco up. And back then you could have 1 foot over the wall. As long as you had 1 foot behind the wall, you were considered behind the wall. So I'm sitting there straddling that Armco waiting for Tim to come, and I'm itching like crazy. I figure nobody's looking, and I got these 2 tires in my hand, so I can't discreetly scratch myself. So I'm rubbing up against the sawed-off telephone pole trying to get some relief. And little did I know, the ESPN cameraman was right there showing this to God and everybody on TV. Me standing there kind of hunching on this post, trying to get some relief. So that's when I learned, you got to be a little bit more discreet in your actions, because you never know when the camera's going to be on. But it has its moments where it produces excitement.
Yeah.
But to me, all in all, it's a pretty boring race. The most exciting race I can think of, Earnhardt was leading and blew up coming into the tunnel turn. And he's slowing down, losing momentum, so he cuts off between the tunnel turn and turn 3 onto the road course, which cuts through the infield and goes out on pit road. So he's looking for a shortcut. So he cuts off on that road course, and, well, his car runs out of momentum, and he stops. And he stopped in the infield with all these drunk fans. Well, Next thing I heard is NASCAR is hollering for security to get over there, that they're raiding beer cans down on his car and everything. So I don't so much like the race at Pocono, but I have had a lot of interesting experiences there.
I bet. And I got a message from Mike. It is Pocono next week, and that is confirmed. So,
oh, good.
Yeah.
One other quick story about Pocono I can tell you about. The year Tim Richmond came back, 87, we're running Tim and Benny both at that race. We didn't have two separate teams. Harry just kind of divided the crew up as best he could. We pitted side by side with both cars, and Harry crew chief both cars during the race. And I had to do tires for both cars during the race.
Oh, wow.
So it was wearing me out. The water at Pocono comes from a water tank, an elevated water tank. And, you know, from the last race to the next race, that water just sits in the tank, so it gets kind of funky. And it was hot, and I'm trying to drink water, and I'm throwing up. I'm feeling bad and such. And I finally told Harry about 10 laps from the end, Tim was leading. And I told Harry, I said, when the race is over, I said, I've got to go to the track hospital. I said, I'm not going to victory lane. I said, I'm really sick. So as soon as the checkered flag fell, I just dropped everything and walked into the infield care center. And as soon as I walked in, you know, it was about 90 degrees outside and humid. I walked in there, and it's like the air conditioner's got it blowing at about 65 degrees. Well, I hit that cold air and I passed out. And when I woke up, I was on a stretcher with about 30 bags of ice packed around me, and they're hauling me to the hospital. I'm having a heat stroke. And the cool thing about it is these good old boys saw that rescue squad coming through the infield heading for the tunnel, and as soon as it got to them, they had their truck fired up, and they jumped in right behind that rescue squad. And so as the cops are waving the rescue squad through traffic to get me to the hospital, this truckload of good old boys is hung right on our bumper like they're with us, and they're waving them through. And, you know, we got out of the track in like 5 minutes, where it usually takes close to an hour to get out of the infield. So by the time we got to the interstate where we turned off, they're honking the horn and waving and thanking us and everything else. I think that was the fastest they ever got out of the track. I know it was the fastest I ever got out of the track.
Oh, I can only imagine all the stories at all the tracks. I would love to be able to pull up the video footage of that you indiscreetly rubbing scratching. Just for entertainment's sake, and I don't know, I guess it'd be one of those throwback Thursdays on Facebook to give everybody a good laugh kind of scenario. But
yeah, I was lucky. Most of my stuff happened before there were camera phones and stuff like that, so it's hard to find records of some of the stuff that I've done.
Oh, goodness. Thursday night show and Facebook group. Let's get this. We get this thing wrapped up tonight.
We got a good show lined up for Racing with Big Sweat on Thursday evening. We tried to have a young lady from Australia, Miss Sarah Walker, on this past Thursday, and her being in Australia and us being here. Excuse me, we could never get hooked up, so we're working on getting that taken care of, and hopefully we'll have her on this Thursday night. And along with, if Sarah can get on, we also have, let me get my drugstores on so I can read this. I swear it sucks getting old sometimes. Damn, I can't even find my list now. God, I can't remember the people's names either. Boy, I'm unprepared. I don't know. I'll have to dig it up, but I'll have it posted. We've got two other guests already lined up to be on the show, so we've got a full show scheduled. And I'm anticipating a real good show, at least better than last week's show, which turned out to be an absolute disaster because none of our guests could get through, and it's kind of hard to have a show where it's just me and CJ talking about it. But tune in Thursday night, 9 o'clock, for Racing with Big Sweat. And I can promise you, it'll be a better show than it was last week. And check that out. My blog will be up late tonight, early in the morning. My blog is NASCAR Shit, Racing with Big Sweat. And you'll hear me talk more about the Martin Truex 600 from yesterday. And
exactly what I called it.
Come join my group, NASCAR and Other Racing. For some reason, for reasons I'm not going to go into, but I had quite a few people tell me today that we have a really good group, a highly respected group, which I'm very proud of that, and an informative group. So we have a lot of people that enjoy being there, and if you're not there, you need to get with the program and get on there with us and come enjoy races. We had this weekend at Pocono, we'll have a Sprint Cup Series race thread during that race, an ARCA race thread during that race, a Camping World Truck Series race thread during that race. I don't think IndyCar is running, but NHRA might be. And if NHRA is running, we'll have a race thread for them too. We talk racing. We're not interested in putting down and bashing other drivers and stuff like that. We just want to talk about racing in an intelligent way. So if you like intelligent conversation, come join that group. And I promise you, you won't be disappointed if you do.
Most definitely. I enjoy myself over there. Enjoy the race threads. Make sure you guys check us out on Facebook, 110 Nation Sports. Check us out on Twitter at 110 Nation. Don't forget the 110 Nation Sports Show will be back on here at 9 o'clock as we'll be talking about the Golden State Warriors and Oklahoma City Thunder Game 7. Decide who's going to play the Cleveland Cavaliers in the NBA Finals starting Thursday nights. We'll be talking more about yesterday's race, any other news going on in the sporting world we'll be talking about, Shorty and I. I don't think we got any guests lined up for tonight. I've not heard from Miss Lee. So it might just be Shorty and myself tonight. But make sure you guys tune in and partake in the show tonight. It would be really swell of you guys. Steve, as always, enjoy myself. Glad to have you here with me tonight. Glad to hear some more stories. I think that's another part is favorite of my show, or favorite part of the shows with you is listening to these stories of what it was like back in the day. I never really sat down and talked to my father about it, and he only did 4 races, but he did those 4 races, and has been on the road and done local stuff. So I can imagine the stories he's had as well. And so I never got those stories. So sitting here listening to you, it just kind of gives me that opportunity to kind of just imagine what it was like back in those days. And so it's really cool. But definitely looking forward to Thursday. Hopefully we get everything situated so we can get all the guests on this week. And definitely we'll be talking to you later in the week. And want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. And y'all have a great night.
Yeah, if things get slow, call me and I'll come back on tonight. I got more stories than Carter's got little green pills, as my grandfather used to say.
Most definitely will do that. Everybody have a great night. I got to get out of here. I got to get over to Shorty's house and get some food before the next show. So I got to escape out here real quick. But 9 o'clock, everybody tune in to the 110 Nation Sports Show.
See ya.